Okay, picture this. A government, barely, a year old, already caught up in some really high-stakes political drama. That's exactly what's happening in South Africa right now. A
Hmm.
pretty major dispute is really shaking the foundations of their new ruling alliance. So the big question we're digging into today is this. How do these powerful coalitions, often, formed out of sheer necessity, how do they handle these intense internal fights, especially when the rules, the power dynamics, they all just clash right out in public?
Yeah, and what's really fascinating here is the specific situation in South Africa's Government of National Unity, the GNU. The main event that's got everyone talking is President Ramaphosa delivering this, well, pretty stinging rebuke to the Democratic Alliance, the DA, and they're the second biggest party holding this whole thing together, so it's a big deal.
Right. So our mission today is to really unpack what's going on here. We're looking at this specific conflict using our source, Ramaphosa rebukes DA over coalition tensions.
Hmm.
We want to figure out what this particular argument tells us about how stable coalition governments really are, anywhere. This deep dive should help you get a handle on that tricky dance of power and politics when disagreements just blow up unexpectedly, sometimes with massive consequences. So the immediate spark, the thing that really lit the fuse here, was President Ramaphosa kicking out the Deputy Trade Minister, Andrew Whitfield. And Whitfield's a key figure in the DA. This wasn't some quiet shuffle. It felt like a very public move.
Exactly. And Ramaphosa's official reason was, well, pretty direct. He pointed to an international trip Whitfield took back in February to the U.S. unsanctioned. The president said point blank this was a clear violation of the rules and established practices. He underlined that ministers or deputies traveling internationally must always, his emphasis, be undertaken with the express permission of the president. So framing it purely as a rule break.
And Ramaphosa didn't just whisper this. He put out this long public statement on Friday. He basically said, "I won't be pushed around." His words were, "shall not yield to threats and ultimatums." Now, in such a, fragile coalition, isn't that kind of language a bit risky? Could it just escalate things further?
Well, that's the gamble, isn't it? It's definitely a calculated risk. I mean, Ramaphosa's camp probably saw it as needing to project strength, right?
Mhm.
Assert his authority, especially, given the DA's track record of sometimes challenging the ANC. But yeah, you could argue maybe a quieter chat might have been better for long-term stability. But clearly Ramaphosa felt he had to draw a line in the sand publicly. He even said he felt forced to explain because of several unfortunate statements and outright distortions by a number of people. He insisted the dismissal was totally in accordance with the Constitution. And crucially, he said he had told the DA leader, John Steenhuisen, beforehand, even asked him for a replacement name, saying, as the DA is entitled to a deputy minister position as agreed.
And he even pulled out some history to back himself up, didn't he? To kind of show this isn't unprecedented. He mentioned previous instances, specifically citing President Mandela removing Winnie Madikizela Mandela way back in '95 for similar reasons.
Right, using that historical weight, it really bolsters his argument that there's no, quote, basis for suggestions that the dismissal is related to any other reason than his failure to receive permission to travel.
Hmm. But, even with that clear line, the fact that he had to explain it so thoroughly, bring up Mandela, it does make you wonder, doesn't it? Is it just about the rules, or is there maybe something else going on underneath, some political maneuvering?
Well, judging by the DA's reaction, they certainly think there's more to it. After Whitfield was out, the DA didn't just complain. They hit back with what you can only really call a fiery ultimatum aimed right at Ramaphosa. Oh, absolutely. And this is where it really blew up. The DA flat out accused the president of a flagrant double standard.
Right.
Their demand was crystal clear. Ramaphosa had until Saturday afternoon to fire other errant ministers and deputies from other parties as well.
Mhm.
And if not, well, then all bets are off, and the consequences will be theirs to bear. Really high-stakes language. Puts
Yeah.
the whole coalition on edge.
Wow. So with that bombshell ultimatum just hanging there, all eyes then turned to the guy right in the middle of it all, Andrew Whitfield. What did he have to say when he talked to SABC, the public broadcaster? What was his take?
Well, Whitfield basically said, look, I got the letter, but no actual reason, no formal explanation for why he was dismissed. He did admit, though, that the trip, which his party, the DA, asked him to take, wasn't formally signed off on, even though he'd apparently put the request in 2 weeks before. And here's the key quote, I think. "I simply took silence as consent, and perhaps that was an error in judgment on my part." That one line, silence as consent, really highlights a major risk in any new power-sharing deal, doesn't it? When the exact rules aren't totally nailed down, or maybe not everyone's clear, these kinds of assumptions about protocol, they can just explode, turn a maybe minor oversight into a huge crisis.
Yeah, that makes sense. And Whitfield seemed to echo his party leader Steenhausen, right? He also felt there might be another motive behind it all. He called the firing premature and an unnecessary provocation. So clearly, in his mind, it's not just about a plane ticket.
Definitely not. And the next thing he said about the coalition's future, that was serious. He said, and I'm quoting again, "I just don't see a situation in which the DA can continue to operate in the GNU in the way we have." He followed up with, "There are a number of options at our disposal, and leaving the GNU is one of them." Now, that's not just talk. That's putting a massive threat on the table. It really puts the pressure on the whole GNU structure. It makes you ask, how serious is that threat? Could the DA actually walk? And what happens to South Africa then?
So let's just pull back for a second and look at the bigger picture here. This Government of National Unity, the GNU, it's important for you listening to remember this isn't some long-established setup. It was cobbled together just over a year ago, right? It happened after that 2024 election didn't give anyone a clear majority. So Ramaphosa's ANC had to team up with rivals, including the DA, who are the second biggest player in this.
Exactly. And what this whole Whitfield saga really shows is that this latest fight, it's not some random out-of-the-blue event. People have described this GNU as being in uncharted waters pretty much from the start. It's been like one of a series of rows that have constantly threatened its survival. The relationship between the ANC and the DA, the two main partners, has reportedly been tense right from day one, clashing over several key issues. It just shows how tough it is when parties with pretty different ideas try to govern together.
And we have seen concrete examples before, haven't we? Like earlier this year, things getting really heated. Remember when the DA actually refused to back a key vote on the national budget in Parliament? That wasn't just, a minor disagreement. That was a fundamental clash over the country's finances. It really shows how shaky this coalition can be.
Absolutely. And looking at the bigger picture, all these internal fights, which often have real policy consequences, they just expose how incredibly complex coalition government is. It's like walking a tightrope all the time, balancing the need to work together with each party's own agenda. And we see here how even a seemingly small administrative slip-up can escalate really fast into a major political crisis, especially if that underlying trust just isn't there.
So what we've really seen unfold in South Africa is this tangled mess of formal rules, clashing personal interpretations, and just raw political power plays. It dictates how these coalitions actually work day to day, or sometimes how they really struggle to work smoothly.
Which leaves us and leaves you with a pretty big thought to chew on, I think. How does a government that's literally built on compromise, on sharing power, actually stay stable when its own members start publicly fighting over the rules and challenging the leader's authority? And maybe even more fundamentally, what does it mean for democracy when something like assuming silence as consent can suddenly become the spark for a nationwide political meltdown?